Right, so imagine this. You've spent the last 18 months pouring your heart, soul, and let's be honest, pretty much every penny you've got into renovating your home. We're talking new kitchen extension, beautiful bifold doors looking out onto the garden, maybe a loft conversion with an ensuite. It's finally finished. You're absolutely chuffed. And then one morning, you go to pick up the post, and there's a brown envelope sitting on your doormat. You open it up, and your stomach just drops. It's from the council, and they're telling you that your renovation, the one you've just spent 50, 60, maybe even £100,000 on, is illegal. Sounds like a nightmare, doesn't it? Well, that's exactly what happened to someone I know. And honestly, it's becoming far more common than you might think. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what went wrong, why this keeps happening to homeowners across the UK, and most importantly, what you absolutely need to know before you even think about picking up a hammer or hiring a builder. If you're watching this and you own property in the UK, or you're thinking about buying, or you're considering any kind of home improvement, trust me, you need to stick around for this one. This could save you thousands of pounds and an absolute mountain of stress. Let's get into it. So let me tell you what actually happened here. My mate, let's call him Dave, bought a 3-bedroom semi-detached house in the Midlands back in 2021. Paid around $280,000 for it, which at the time felt like a lot. But you know how the market was back then. Everything was going mental. Anyway, Dave had big plans. He wanted to add a single-storey rear extension to create an open-plan kitchen and living space. Nothing too outrageous, just about 4 meters deep into the garden. He also wanted to convert the loft into a 4th bedroom with a small shower room. Now, Dave's not stupid. He did his research, he went online, read a bunch of articles about permitted development rights, and genuinely believed that what he was planning to do didn't need planning permission. And to be fair, on the surface, it looked like he might be right. He hired a local builder, got some architectural drawings done, and off they went. The build took about 8 months in total, with all the usual delays and headaches that come with any renovation project. But eventually, it was finished. The place looked absolutely stunning. Genuinely transformed the house. Dave was over the moon. He even started thinking about maybe selling up and moving somewhere bigger, riding the wave of his increased property value. And then the letter arrived. Turns out, a neighbour had made a complaint to the council. They weren't happy about the extension blocking some of their light, or something along those lines. The council sent someone round to investigate, and that's when everything went pear-shaped. The investigation revealed 2 major problems. First, Dave's extension was actually 4.5 meters deep, not 4 meters. Now, that might not sound like much, but that extra half meter pushed him over the limit for permitted development. Second, and this was the real kicker, his loft conversion included a dormer window that faced onto the road. Under permitted development rules, dormer windows are only allowed on the rear of the property, not the front or side. Just like that, Dave's dream renovation was classified as unauthorised development, and now he was facing the very real possibility of having to tear parts of it down. Alright, let me take a step back here and explain something that I think a lot of homeowners in the UK don't fully understand, and that's the whole planning permission system. So in the UK, if you want to make significant changes to your property, you generally need to get permission from your local council before you do it. This is called planning permission, and it's been around in some form since the Town and Country Planning Act of 1947. The idea behind it is pretty straightforward. The council wants to make sure that any changes you make to your property don't negatively impact the local area. That could mean things like blocking your neighbour's light, changing the character of the street, increasing traffic, or putting strain on local infrastructure. When you apply for planning permission, the council looks at your plans, consults with neighbours and other relevant parties, and then makes a decision. They might approve it outright, approve it with conditions, or reject it entirely. Now, the planning process can take anywhere from 8 weeks to several months, and there's a fee involved. For a typical householder application, you're looking at around £250 to £300, though this can vary. Here's where it gets interesting though. Not every change to your property needs planning permission, and that's where permitted development rights come in. Permitted development rights are basically a set of rules that allow homeowners to make certain changes to their properties without needing to apply for full planning permission. The government introduced these to cut down on bureaucracy and make it easier for people to improve their homes. Under permitted development, you can do things like build a single-story rear extension up to a certain size, add a conservatory, put up a garden shed or summer house, install solar panels, or convert your loft, all without going through the full planning process. But, and this is a massive but, there are very specific limits and conditions attached to each type of development, and this is where so many homeowners come unstuck. For example, with a single-story rear extension, if you've got a detached house, you can extend up to 4 meters from the original rear wall without planning permission. For a semi-detached or terraced house, it's only 3 meters. There are also height restrictions, limits on how much of your garden you can cover, rules about materials matching the existing house, and restrictions on things like balconies and raised platforms. With loft conversions, you can add up to 40 cubic meters of additional roof space for a terraced house, or 50 cubic meters for a detached or semi-detached. But dormer windows can only face the rear. You can't exceed the height of the existing roof, and you can't use materials that look significantly different from the rest of the house. The thing is, these rules are genuinely complicated, and they can vary depending on where you live. If your property is in a conservation area, a national park, an area of outstanding natural beauty, or a World Heritage Site, your permitted development rights are much more restricted. Some properties have had their permitted development rights removed entirely through what's called an Article 4 direction. And if you live in a flat or a maisonette rather than a house, you generally don't have any permitted development rights at all. Here's something that's really important to understand in the context of the current UK housing market. Local councils are getting much more aggressive about enforcing planning rules. There are a few reasons for this. First, there's been a massive boom in home improvements over the past few years. During the pandemic, loads of people suddenly found themselves working from home, staring at their four walls, and thinking about how they could improve their living spaces. Garden offices, loft conversions, extensions, you name it. The home improvement industry absolutely exploded. With that boom came a corresponding increase in unauthorised development. Some estimates suggest that there are hundreds of thousands of homes across the UK with illegal extensions or modifications. Councils are also under more pressure than ever to meet housing targets and maintain the character of their local areas. They're getting more complaints from neighbours about building work, and they've got more tools at their disposal to investigate and take action. Plus, and this is something that doesn't get talked about enough, councils can now use things like satellite imagery and aerial photography to spot unauthorised development. They don't need to physically visit every property anymore. They can literally see from space that your extension is bigger than it should be. Right, let's talk about the housing market angle here, because this is crucial for anyone thinking about property as an investment. The UK housing market has been on quite a journey over the past few years. We've seen record highs, we've seen corrections, we've seen interest rate rises that have affected affordability across the board. As of right now, the average house price in the UK is hovering around £290,000, though obviously this varies massively depending on where you are. Now, here's the thing about illegal extensions and modifications. They can absolutely tank your property value, and they can make your house incredibly difficult to sell. When you sell a property in England or Wales, your solicitor will ask you to fill out a form called the TA6, which is the Property Information Form. One of the questions on there asks about any alterations that have been made to the property and whether the appropriate consents were obtained. If you've got an illegal extension, you've essentially got 3 choices. You can lie about it, which is fraud, and could land you in serious legal trouble. You can disclose it, which will almost certainly cause the sale to fall through or result in a significant price reduction. Or you can try to regularise the situation before selling, which takes time and money and isn't always possible. Buyers' solicitors are also pretty savvy these days. They'll often compare current photographs or floor plans with historic records to spot any discrepancies. And if a mortgage lender discovers that there's unauthorised development on a property, they might refuse to lend on it altogether. I've seen cases where properties with illegal extensions have sold for 20 or 30% less than comparable homes in the same area. In some cases, they've sat on the market for years because nobody wants to take on the hassle. Alright, so let's say you're in Dave's situation. You've received that brown envelope from the council, and they're telling you your development is unauthorised. What actually happens next? Well, the council has several options. If they believe the breach is serious enough, they'll issue what's called an enforcement notice. This is a formal legal document that requires you to remedy the breach within a specified time period. The enforcement notice will tell you exactly what the council considers to be unauthorised, what steps you need to take to fix it, and how long you've got to do it. This could mean anything from making modifications to bring the development into compliance to removing it entirely and restoring the land to its previous condition. If you ignore an enforcement notice, the council can prosecute you. You could face unlimited fines, and in some cases, the council can actually come onto your property, do the remedial work themselves, and then bill you for it. Now, you do have the right to appeal an enforcement notice. You've got 28 days from when the notice is served to lodge an appeal with the planning inspectorate. There are various grounds for appeal, including arguing that planning permission should be granted, that the development has been there long enough to be immune from enforcement, or that the notice isn't valid for some technical reason. The appeals process can take months, and there's no guarantee you'll win, but it does buy you time, and in some cases, it's worth pursuing. So what can you actually do if you find yourself in this situation? Well, there are a few options. The first thing you should do is get professional advice. Talk to a planning consultant or a solicitor who specialises in planning law. They can assess your situation and tell you what your realistic options are. In many cases, you can apply for retrospective planning permission. This is basically applying for permission after the work has already been done. The council will consider your application just like any other planning application. They might approve it with conditions, or reject it. If they reject it, you can appeal that decision to the planning inspectorate. And even if you lose the appeal, you might be able to negotiate some kind of compromise with the council, like making modifications to bring the development closer to compliance. There's also something called a certificate of lawfulness. If your unauthorised development has been in place for a certain amount of time without any enforcement action, it might become immune from enforcement. For operational development, like an extension, this period is 4 years. For a change of use, it's 10 years. If you can prove that your development has been substantially complete for more than 4 years and no enforcement notice has been served, you can apply for a certificate of lawful use or development. This doesn't mean planning permission has been granted, but it does mean the council can no longer take enforcement action against it. Alright, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Let me wrap things up by giving you some practical advice on how to avoid ending up in this situation in the first place. First and foremost, never assume that your project falls under permitted development without getting proper confirmation. The rules are complicated and they vary depending on your specific circumstances. What applied to your mate's house might not apply to yours. Before you start any work, apply to your local council for a certificate of lawful development, sometimes called a clopid. This is a formal confirmation from the council that your proposed development is lawful under permitted development rights. It costs about £150 and takes about 8 weeks, but it gives you cast iron proof that you don't need planning permission. If your project does need planning permission, apply for it. Yes, it takes time. Yes, there's a fee. Yes, the council might impose conditions or even refuse your application. But going through the proper process protects you in the long run. Always hire professionals who know what they're doing. A good architect or architectural technician will guide you through the planning process and make sure your designs comply with all the relevant rules. Don't just rely on your builder to know what's allowed. Keep records of everything: planning decisions, building control sign-offs, certificates, guarantees, all of it. When you eventually come to sell your property, you'll need to provide evidence that everything was done properly. And finally, maintain good relationships with your neighbours. A huge proportion of enforcement cases start with a neighbour complaint. If you're planning any kind of building work, have a chat with the people next door before you start. Keep them informed, address any concerns they have, and try to minimise disruption. It could save you a world of pain down the line. Look, I know this has been quite a heavy video. Nobody wants to think about brown envelopes from the council or the possibility that their home improvements might land them in legal trouble. But the reality is that this is happening to people across the UK every single day, and with the way the housing market is right now, with affordability stretched and every pound of equity mattering more than ever, you really can't afford to take shortcuts. Dave's story isn't over yet. He's currently going through the retrospective planning application process, and his planning consultant thinks they've got a reasonable chance of getting approval, possibly with some modifications to the dormer window situation, but it's cost him thousands in professional fees, months of stress, and there's still no guarantee of a happy ending. The lesson here is simple. Do your homework, get proper advice, and never assume. Planning rules exist for a reason, and councils have more power than ever to enforce them. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and means I can keep bringing you this kind of content. If you've got questions about planning permission, permitted development, or anything else related to the UK housing market, drop them in the comments below. I read every single one and I'll do my best to help. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss my next video. I'll be back soon with more insights into what's happening in the UK property market and what it means for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.